series was made possible by Barloworld Logistics and produced by Fresh Interactive Media.
When it comes to road traffic collision investigation, there are many protocols you need to follow. The important element about protocols is that it enables you to protect yourself from a variety of possible problems and errors. For starters, you know exactly what to do when, where to go to do it, and who to interact with to achieve that goal. Also, by following protocol, you protect yourself from questions regarding issues you might have addressed or issues you might not have addressed. If you are asked in court why you photographed a particular element or took a particular action, you can explain that this was part of your protocol. If you are then also asked why you did not do something, photograph something, or take some action, you can also explain that this is not included in your protocol. I'm Stan Besaidnot from IBF Investigations, and this is the series called All the Evidence. Over many years and thousands of cases investigating at scene for government, private, national contractors, South African Police Service, Road Accident Fund, and a number of different bodies, we have come to understand the various needs everybody might have. If you're going to investigate a road traffic collision, you are never in a position to know on that day at the scene what the possible arguments will be in court one day. For this reason, this protocol was written to enable you to follow each step along your investigative process, not to forget anything, to include everything, and to structure your investigation properly and effectively as an expert should. In this episode, we'll be covering equipment. No soldier can go to war without his rifle, his bullets, and his protective gear. Not unlike that, when you want to proceed to arrive at, control, manage and or work at a road traffic collision scene, you should be sure that you have the right equipment with you. Let's go to the laboratory so we can show you what kind of equipment it is you will need. When it comes to equipment, I often ask people what they think the most important pieces of equipment are. I invariably get answers like camera, audio recorder, measuring wheel and all these kinds of things. But the fact is that the most important equipment is actually the equipment that you use to protect yourself. If anything happens to you, everything you intended to do will not happen. One of the most important aspects is to ensure that you are visible. Because road traffic collisions might include moving traffic, lots of moving people, and even emergency vehicles arriving and departing, you must be visible. In order to achieve this, it's always necessary for you, especially when you arrive on the scene in any investigative capacity, to wear a reflective jacket. A reflective jacket is designed to ensure that you are visible in all lighting conditions. It's important to wear this. Of course, if you're involved in a collision yourself and you're simply jumping out to record the evidence for yourself, you might not have access to this equipment. But it might be a good idea to get one of the cheaper ones that you can keep in your vehicle just to be ready to use it. Because every road traffic collision scene can potentially be a crime scene, it is also very important that you contaminate as little as possible, and if ever possible, not at all. If you are involved in the collision yourself, you will be contaminating simply by exiting your vehicle, but this is contamination that we understand. If you arrive at the scene to investigate in any capacity, you must be sure to take nothing away and to leave nothing behind. This includes things like fingerprints. It's always important to wear surgical gloves Surgical gloves are worn for a number of reasons. The first and most important reason is to ensure that you do not contaminate yourself with chemicals and/or fluids, including bloodborne pathogens at the scene. The other reason is to prevent you from leaving unnecessary fingerprints. If a vehicle was stolen, they might want to take fingerprints. If your fingerprints are there, there will be a whole additional process just to eliminate you from the suspects included in the crime. In some cases, you will approach, interact with, or potentially get exposed to chemicals. Because of this, it's always a good idea to wear safety glasses. If you're working in and around vehicles, especially in the post-event examination stage, you might have to enter and exit vehicles. Glass shards, small pieces of glass, dust and all kinds of particles can enter into your eyes. It's always a good idea to protect them. At any scene where vehicles have burned, you always have a small amount of dust particles around that are very fine and that are floating in the air. It's never a good idea to inhale any chemicals that you're not familiar with. For this reason, whenever you work at or around the scene where there are dust particles or potential particles floating around, you should wear protective gear in as far as protecting yourself from inhaling some of those particles. When you're going to touch the vehicle, especially around glass, removing a license disc, etc., it's also important to wear protective gloves. These gloves are stronger, are more laceration resistant, but remember that puncture wounds are still possible. It's always a good idea to protect yourself from all the possible risks you could face at and around road traffic scenes. It's also possible for you to come across road traffic collision scenes at night. It goes without saying that when you interact with a scene at night, you have to be able to see, while at the same time you might need light to assist with your photography. A good tactical torch or flashlight, or some of the rechargeable varieties, are always ideal to have. You can never have enough light at scenes for the reasons of safety and security, and also because it enables you to photograph even better. When it comes to marking the position of vehicles on the scene, there are a number of options. If you are not equipped, you can take a stone or a rock or anything that you can scratch with to make a mark to identify the position of the vehicle on the scene. Of course, there are some items that you might never want to bring close to a scene or use to mark with. Marking spray or marking chalk is always a good option, but keep in mind that you can never contaminate a crash scene. The Road Traffic Act states that you may never move a vehicle from its position of rest, and that you may only do so if it causes an obstruction or danger to traffic. But where you do this, the position of the vehicle must be clearly marked. Keep in mind that where a crime scene is involved, such as where people have died or a drunken driving incident, it might be better never to move the vehicle at all until police arrives or until the scene has been completely investigated. Whenever you work at the scene of a collision, especially when you work in pairs or in groups, it is always important to stay in contact. A simple two-way radio can mean the difference between life and death, literally. You might need to call on a partner or assistant to come and help you to identify and or investigate evidence. You might need to call for backup or assistance if a confrontation develops. In all instances, it's better to stay in touch and better to be able to communicate. If you're involved in a scene not as an official investigator, it might be a good idea for you to call somebody on the telephone and to speak through the investigation. If you have someone else witnessing your activities, it's always better and easier for you to call on assistance or to report an emergency if one develops. When it comes to photographing the scene of a collision, it's good to have a nice handy camera, something small that you can carry around with you. The Fujifilm X-P is pretty much ideal on account of the fact that it's good resolution. It has a 14 megapixel sensor, which means you can get very good quality. It's pretty much water resistant, drop resistant and crush resistant, and it can operate in a wide variety of temperatures. Your budget will determine the camera you will use, and some people will only have a cell phone. But we'd rather have you take all the photographs you can with whatever you've got than to not take any on account of the fact that you don't have the best equipment available. You should never interact with people at a scene communicate with people at the scene, report an incident, receive information, or record the details without having an audio recorder. Of course, you can use your cellular phone as well, but a dedicated recorder is normally sensitive, can record long periods, and has a good battery life. It's always a good idea to record and to document everything you do and everything you heard and saw. For the purpose of measuring the scene, you must keep in mind that the ability to measure the scene is directly linked to your skill level. While this will be covered in a later episode, you should at least have a measuring wheel available. The measuring wheel is very nice because it can operate on a variety of surfaces. It's easy to measure even when you're on your own. You don't need a second person to hold the other side of a tape measure, and it's fairly accurate for the purposes of accident scene investigation. So in a perfect world, you want to have some of the best equipment available. You might want to use laser digital scanners, total station measuring devices, specialist cameras, night photography techniques, dedicated lenses, and a variety of pieces of equipment. But if you have at least the equipment we've covered now, you'll be able to do an investigation to a level that can assist any court anywhere. In this episode, we covered equipment. You now know what it is you will need in order to investigate your scene properly, to record the information you need to record, and to interact with everybody effectively. In episode 2, you will learn about taking that first call. Now that you're geared up and ready to go, you are going to start receiving your calls. It's very important when that person first calls you that you record the right information. If you miss something or you overlook something, you might not be in a position to communicate and to call back to that caller, as an example. And that's it for this episode. See you in the next episode of All the Evidence.